Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get a break from recapping the games yesterday, and we're going to look to tonight with the last game of Week 5 in the NFL, previewing the Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs matchup on Monday Night Football. We're back to the single Monday Night Football game tonight as the Saints travel to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, and I'm getting some news, obviously, related to the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. The Chiefs wide receiver, Rashee Rice, is expected to miss the remainder of the 2024 season as he needs his LCL to be repaired. So, there you have it. Rashee Rice, we've been speculating from last week on what the diagnosis was going to be, and it's funny enough how it came at this moment when I'm going to preview this game. But yeah, he's expected to miss the remainder of the 2024 season, trying to repair, having surgery on his LCL and trying to repair that. So it's a big bummer, a big loss for the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously. We sort of thought that could be the worst case scenario, right, because of how bad the injury looked, but now we got that confirmation, and it's a big loss, obviously, for the Chiefs, right, to lose their number one in a spot where I felt like he was really starting to be molded into this go-to guy, scheming him open for the Kansas City Chiefs. But, yeah, a big loss nonetheless. So, looking at this game now a little bit more, the Chiefs are still 4-0. They're one of two teams that remains undefeated, and now the Vikings have already won their game. So, we'll see if the Chiefs are able to stay undefeated, while the New Orleans Saints, coming off of back-to-back losses to their division rivals, the Falcons, and in a close one to the Eagles. So, there's a lot riding on this game pretty much. You know, the Saints trying to stay in that division race, and the Chiefs trying to not give up any ground, knowing that, you know, Rashee Rice isn't coming back. Hollywood Brown's probably not coming back during the regular season. Pacheco, same thing. They need to rack up as many wins, right, for any moment where they might hit a bad run of games. They won these games at the beginning of the year, so that's going to be important. And talking about the Saints now, going back to them, looking at some of the injury news for them heading into this game, the inactives so far for the Saints officially heading into tonight's game is going to be Pete Werner. Their linebacker is going to be inactive tonight. Peyton Turner, another defensive end, will be also not playing. Cesar Ruiz, one of their offensive guards, is out of this game. Taysom Hill is also out of this game as well. And you look at the original diagnosis of this game, it was only really Pete Werner, their linebacker, who was questionable. Everybody else was already ruled out for the game days before, obviously tonight. So big losses for the Saints already from the offensive side and the defensive side as well. Also, their linebacker Willie Gay is not going to be playing as well. The former Chiefs player is not going to face his former team. And now, looking at the Saints, right, they have we've seen two sides of the spectrum with them. You know, the first 2 weeks, perfect, destroying the Panthers and then destroying the Cowboys in week 2. They're looking like a serious threat. You know, Clint Kubiak is the talk of the town. Alvin Kamara is looking like the second best running back in the NFL. Derek Carr, a revival of his career and things like that. It's all looking great. And then you get the last 2 weeks where the offense kind of gets stifled against the Eagles. You give up some big moments and big plays to the Atlanta Falcons where you feel sick of giving up that game and losing a divisional game as well on top of that. So it's been the highest of highs to start and then the lowest of lows in the last 2 games now. But after especially those first 2 wins came with a combined score of 91-29, the NFL could really humble you in just week to week, right? You get such a great performance in the first 2, and then you come back, and it's quite the opposite. So now you're dealing with the injuries as well. It could be pretty tough, right? And I think going back to those games and what we can learn from it about the Saints is that in some of those moments where it could lead to bad decisions and missed opportunities, like we talked about with the Eagles, right? Going for it on 4th down where you kick a field goal and maybe you don't lose by 3 points, or other situations. I forget exactly what they were, but I know I talked about a couple of them in that game that I'm sure they're going to want to have back. And then last week against the Falcons, going more into specifics, it was a just back-breaking pass interference call against them to just set up Atlanta very nicely to kick that game-winning field goal. And it's moments like that where you think like a call like that, you want to blame it on the refs or anything like that. It's really just like, you know what you're supposed to do and not do in those moments, and to kind of risk it on that pass interference call and take that gamble. That I feel like that's more on the Saints than it is on the ref making a call like that or something like that. So, those are moments where I think you really start to see the difference from a very, very good team, experienced and savvy team, and then you get the Saints where they're good. They have all the pieces, it seems like, but when it comes to these big moments, you kind of need to be there to take something from it and know what to do in those exact moments. And I feel like the Ravens haven't been there, so we've seen some of these losses now with their performances. And now looking at the Chiefs and their injuries that they have to deal with, obviously we just got that update on Rashee Rice, but elsewhere, looking at their inactives for tonight, there's going to be no Carson Thomas, their defensive end, no C.J. Hansen, one of their guards, or Marlon, their defensive tackle, Marlon, as well. And they weren't dealing with too many big injuries coming into this game, other than the fact maybe some guys were a little bit questionable, but still the biggest ones remain. And the biggest, I think, what if or biggest answer we still need to have for this game is, what is this offense going to be without Rashee, without Pacheco, and without Hollywood Brown? All of those guys that they pretty much brought in this year outside of Pacheco and Rashee Rice, what are they going to be like now? What is Xavier Worthy going to look like now, really taking up a lot of that responsibility and things like that? Carson Steele, another young guy, what is he going to bring to the table? Is Travis Kelce going to continue to put on these performances, or is he maybe going to be up and down as well? It's very interesting where they stand, and it's huge that they're 4-0 right now, because if they would have lost to like the Chargers or the Falcons or something like that, it could get very, very worrying, right? With this unknown that you have at these positions. So, they've been in a lot of close games, and unlike the Saints, where they might have faltered in some decisions or plays that were there or that weren't there that they tried to make. The difference with the Chiefs is you look at their 4 wins as well, and they've been in all close games as well. You look at the nail-biter with the Ravens, the last-second field goal win against Cincinnati, the big 4th down stop in Atlanta as well, and then last week overcoming a 10-point deficit to beat the Chargers. Where the Saints kind of failed at in those moments, the Chiefs have done it 4 different times and have always just been there in the end. They always come out on top, it seems, and that's where I think you really see some of the difference between the Chiefs being in these tight moments, despite all these injuries, right? It just feels like they know what to do with Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, and all these guys. It's a big difference, right? You might look at this team and think like, wow, they're all injured. How do they keep pulling away with these wins? When you're talking about the expertise, being there in those moments and knowing what to do and how to feel like, it ends up being the difference. And they've been able to get more out of Travis Kelce now, and their defense is playing very good in general, but in those big moments, it always feels like they come out on top as well. So when you have that and Patrick Mahomes, a lot of these games are going to swing in your favor. But against the New Orleans Saints now, I'm looking at some interesting matchups that are going to determine this game, starting off with Chris Jones going up against that injured interior offensive line for the Saints, right? No Cesar Ruiz, no Eric McCoy as well. The backers are going to have a handful with Chris Jones, obviously, and now also looking at this injured Saints defense, Travis Kelce, how successful is he going to be going up against a injured linebacking room as well? Tyrann Mathieu, how much does he see of him, and how much do they try to move him around and move him to different areas to affect their game plan? That's going to be interesting to see how both of those guys are deployed in this game. And just some questions I have about this game. Can the Saints establish the run? Much like you look at the other performances by other running backs against the Chiefs, Derrick Henry, Zach Moss, Bijan Robinson, and J.K. Dobbins all combined had 55 carries and only managed to to rack up 143 rushing yards on this Chiefs defense. So now, can they get that going with no Eric McCoy, with no Cesar Ruiz? That's going to be a big swing point as well. Can the Chiefs get production in their passing game? You know, the running game might be all right, but can they make big passes when they need it on 3rd and long, on 2nd and long, and count on guys like Noah Gray, Xavier Worthy, and guys like this to make plays? That's going to be a difference maker as well, I believe. And, going back to those decision-making moments, right? The 4th downs, the time managements, the turnover battles as well. I feel like the Saints are going to be in this game, and it's going to come down to those moments to make the difference between a win and a loss. So I'm really interested to see how that pans out. But my prediction, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I feel like those offensive line injuries, Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy especially, are big, especially because Clint Kubiak, we talked about the zone run and setting up the play action off of that. If you don't really have production like that from your offensive line and Chris Jones just being in there messing everything up, I think it's going to put you behind the chains. Then I expect Steve Spagnuolo to blitz the heck out of Derek Carr and just get in his face. I feel like it's going to be too much if the running game's not there with the offensive lineman being out and not having the most outlandish receivers, right? Rashid Shaheed is nice. Chris Olave is very good, but I feel like you're going to need more, and I feel like they're just too injured. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs. They stay perfect to match the Minnesota Vikings, and that'll wrap up Week 5. But we have one more topic to get to. I have to make sure I mention this weird story that developed last week. Thursday to Friday, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, Romeo Doubs, was not present at practice, and now it appears that we know why and how and what does that mean going forward for the trade deadline involving Romeo Doubs and the Packers. All of that is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.